Yeah. Take one.
Take
Go.
one.
All right, everybody. Welcome to a new episode of the EP podcast. We're here with Jonathan and the one and only Calum Raistrick. Calum, for the people who've been living under a rock, could you briefly introduce yourself?
Thanks for having me on, boys. So I'm based in the UK. We run a company called Pro Coach, which is some people might have. When I always do podcasts, I always refer back to like the roots. So like we were originally Muscle Mentors 3-4 years ago. That's where we kind of broke out onto that scene and did some education, did a lot of coaching, and then I wanted to specialize more so in coaching athletes, coaching bodybuilders specifically. And as you boys would have seen, Muscle Mentors was heavily education focused, and it started to kind of water down the message in terms of where we wanted to specialize in. So that was the birth of Pro Coach, and now we're there's 7 coaches that work for the company. We've got clients in I think 19 countries now. So it's going worldwide and growing at a good rate. And I think the main difference for us since making the switch, and the main difference for me over the last couple of years, is working from kind of the grassroots up in terms of the sport, and now a lot of the clients that even you boys and everyone that you've seen come onto the team this year in the last couple of years, it's on the precipice of the NPC trying to get a pro card, or it's pros already. So we're coaching at a pretty high level now, which is very cool.
All right, yeah. So to stay on that topic, because I've been following you since you were CR Physique. That was even before Muscle Mentors, I believe. And obviously, I've seen you coach people from basically a beginner all the way up to a pro. Like, it's one thing to take someone that's already good and make them even better. I mean, that is a whole podcast topic on its own. But taking someone from a beginner to a pro, that's obviously, you see the whole journey. And that was basically what I wanted to ask is, if you look at those cases, right? If you look at those guys and girls that you've coached from a beginner to pro, what would you say generally does it take to go that route?
I think like a lot of the guys that have come from, I've coached quite a lot of people now that that still coach me that are now pros, that have come from first seasons of trying to win the class at a regional, and then trying to win an overall at a regional, then having the first shot at a pro qualifier, then getting in the first call out of a pro qualifier, getting the top 3, winning the class, and then winning an overall. It's a long process, and it requires a lot of patience there in terms of the journey that an individual has to go on to get to that level. Now, don't get me wrong, like we've all seen the situations where people have kind of broke out of the scene and they've scaled very, very quickly into those ranks, and those are normally the individuals that get to the into the pro league, get to the RFB status, and then realize the level that they're at, and then be like, Jesus, like I need to almost work from scratch now I'm here, and I need to put the time in to develop. But I think the main commonalities in those athletes are there's a level of there is a level of self-confidence, but there's a level of assurance in their own minds that they're capable of doing what they need to do in the long run. But there's also a level of patience, which takes a lot of discipline to be patient enough to understand that it's a process, and to understand that it takes a long time for that process to come to fruition. And it's taking one step at a time. Instead of going from your first regional to, I'm going to now go to a pro qualifier and try and win the overall, it's taking your first regional and then, I need to work my way up at that regional level. I need to get into a position where I'm in the overall. All right, how do I win an overall now? What do I need to improve relative to my feedback or relative to my other competitors that level to take that win? And then getting to a pro qualifier is a whole different game in terms of the level that needs to be brought there. And then it's just basically starting from scratch again, winning the pro qualifier in your class, and then getting to an overall and then winning that. So it's a process. It takes a lot of discipline. It takes a lot of patience from a competitive standpoint, because one thing that you'll see as a commonality is all these individuals are highly competitive individuals. So they all expect the highest, level of standards for themselves as athletes. They all expect the highest level of outcome at every prep. But it's also like, those are the individuals where it's like, I'll give you an example. Like I've worked with Josh Bridgman now as a good example for like 5 years. And we went from, the first show in the NPC and he won the overall at that show. And then we went and did the British final. I think we came second at that. And then it was, a mutual understanding of like, we're just not ready to win at that level yet. So he went back, he did a whole off season. And then the second year we prepped, we basically repeated the same thing. So he won the overall at the regional. We went to Portugal, to Estoril, the casino venue, and we did a pro qualifier. He won his class, which is another like pat on your back, like, right, we're in the mix in terms of we're where we are where we need to be.
Because that's the Olympia amateur, right?
No, he won that one. The show
really?
Before that, he won the one the week after. That's a story in itself. But the first show we did in Portugal, we lost in the overall to the local guy who was actually really good. We lost in the overall to that chap. And, there's a lot of lessons in the first time you face big loss. And I always say this, it's like you judge a character and you judge an athlete not on how they act when they get off stage once they've won. It's how they act when they get off stage once they've lost, so they've fallen a little bit shorter than what they expected. And the goal and the benchmark is always going to be like, I want to win every show I go into. But it's also an acceptance over, if I don't win, instead of being frustrated or blaming, a certain thing, or saying, oh, the show's rigged, or this or that. It's just I remember with Josh, there was 5 minutes after he got off stage where he just needed time to himself to just let that, decompress and to realize what had happened. And then it was an immediate, we got back to the Airbnb and it was an immediate, right, how can I be better? When's the next show? What do we need to do to be better next week? And it's the ability to be constructive, even when your mind's saying, you've just fallen short. There's something in your mind that tells you want to throw your toys at your pram and be negative. But the athlete in the competitive level up here and that level of discipline just takes you on to, right, let's start climbing the ladder and then get better until we can be in a position where we've earned the right to win. And a lot of people that jump into the sport and expect these things to happen very, very quickly just don't understand the levels and the layers that need to be there for you to be in a position where, you can get into a position where you lose and you fall short. How do you act once that happens? Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. That's also something you see quite often when people get off stage. They didn't take the placing they wanted to. They're like, okay, what's next? Well, we'll just go binge eating instead of making new plans or looking ahead to the future. And just what you said, how can we make this better? They drop everything on hand and then just focus on, I don't know, nothing similar to training or competing, but the quite opposite.
100%. That's where, like, I'm a firm believer in the fact that, and I'll see this time and time again, where like post show for an individual in that situation, win or loss, like it's the coach's responsibility to show them where do we go from here. Let's map out the timeline again. Let's reconstruct what we were envisioning and let's create another plan. But it's also the athlete's responsibility to stay composed. Yeah. And it's the people that are really erratic in that situation and just foil out of control and the decisions don't reflect their long-term objectives. That's why you're going to start to fall short there, because, and you all know, even like, John, with the show that we've just done, like how important that post-show phase is to set up the entire off season to come. Definitely. And like even like the matter of like a 1 month window, a 4 week window post-show can be the difference between a successful growth phase and an unsuccessful growth phase. And the people that string together perfectly execute phases, even if they've fallen short, it's like, right, slot back into place, continue, because they know the journey for them is longer than just one show.
Yeah. So just to attach to that, like we get a lot of young guys in that basically they have all the enthusiasm to like get into competing and to become a pro. And myself, I did my first show when I was, I believe, 20. And I had that same vision, I had that same drive, and I went into a prep and I did like tunnel vision, everything, spend all my money, everything. And then the placing wasn't what I expected, right? So, and I didn't have any like vision of what would be after it. Nobody told me how those things worked.
Yeah.
And so I'd fallen into that trap myself, basically, where post show I'd blame like everything outside of myself, and things just started going south. And it actually took me like honestly full 2 years or something to both physically and mentally recover from that. And then that's 2 years, I wouldn't say lost, but you could have spent them a lot more productive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you just would have known, basically.
All right, let's see another question. So what is the difference between someone doing well at a regional show versus someone who wins a pro show qualifier? So the difference between those two.
Yeah. So like I think like one of the nuances of like regional to NPC pro qualifier will be like just the overall standard of competitor you're going to have in, like, say we've got a class of 10 individuals. If you're at a regional, you've probably got like 2 or 3, maybe 4 or 5 individuals, a first call out that's going to be of a pretty decent standard. And then of that first call out, you're probably going to have 2 or 3 of those individuals that will be of a sufficient standard to take, you know, competitive stance at a pro qualifier. A lot of the pro qualifiers you go to, and this is, you know, worldwide, especially if it's an amateur Olympia that have a higher you know, depth of competitors.
Yeah,
they're all going to be good. And the difference is, like, unless you're in a position where, you know, once you've got an individual that's consistently placing top 2, top 3, or winning in a regional, you know, it's like, right, they're on the cusp of being in a position where they can really start to do some damage at that higher level in terms of pro qualifiers. But, you know, I would generally say, and I think you boys will agree, unless an athlete is in a position where they can go in and consistently win regional overalls, like, I would just say you're not ready to move into a pro qualifier yet, because, you know, and there's confirmation in how you're being judged, because all the judges at the regionals are going to be the same kind of criteria that you're doing at a pro qualifier. Once you can be in a position where you're consistently winning those overalls at a regional level, then you can go and compete and be competitive at a pro qualifier. And it's not like, it's not when you're looking at the cream of the crop with regional standards, the guys that are winning are the guys that also match the criteria for the pro qualifiers. They've got enough size, they've got enough conditioning. Yes, there might need to be another 5% jump to get them to a position where they're ready to win a pro qualifier. But if you're coming in the 4s, the 5s, the 3s, then, you know, just have the patience to take a little bit of time to refine yourself and work on what your feedback was, and then you can guarantee you'll go back and you'll be in a position where you can get to that level and be competitive.
That's basically the reason why we pulled out of the Bonac, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Same thing.
Yeah.
But like that in itself, for you as an athlete, it's like there's an understanding there from coach to client where it's like, you know, I'm in no rush to jump. I can't jump those hurdles. Like, it takes time.
Yeah.
And, you know, you're in a position where it's like, well, I could go to a pro qualifier, but I almost know the outcome already because I've seen that firsthand from the regional. So use the feedback. You know, be really critical of yourself in terms of like being objective over where you placed and where the look was, and then just refine those elements until it's there.
Yeah. Right.
All right, then we go into the realm of genetics, because obviously we know genetics play a big role in terms of like becoming an IFBB pro. So everybody that goes into bodybuilding does their first show. Like, probably not everybody's gonna have what it takes to even become an IFBB pro, honestly, with years of hard work. I mean, you might be able to get close, but in your words, how big of a role do they play in that process? Like, what do you actually need?
Yeah, at the pro level, and especially people at the pro level doing well, genetics in terms of how far you can take a physique and how much tissue you can gain and what that looks like on stage in terms of structure and muscle bellies and presentation, it's a huge element. You know, there won't be anyone on the Olympia stage that isn't genetically gifted in that department, and there won't be anyone placing inside of the top 3 at a pro level that isn't genetically gifted in that department. You do see amateurs that just work their ass off for a long period of time that turn pro, and that will happen because they're just climbing the ranks over a long period of time. But I just use the general rule of thumb that any amateur that can scale the NPC quickly and win consistently quickly and then turn pro quickly is always going to be an individual with blessed genetic potential, always.
Yeah.
And it's the guys that you know that have competed at the overalls and the national finals and the pro qualifiers 3, 4, 5, 6 times. Those are the guys that just graft their way there. And those are usually the guys that get to the pro level at the IFBB and think, fucking hell, like there's another mile I need to cover to even get a look in at this level. Yeah. And that's then just going from, you know, grafting your way to being a big fish in a small pond to then taking yourself to that next level. And that's why a lot of these guys don't end up competing a lot as pros, because they realize that the standard just goes another level straight away.
How big of a role do you think is the coach in that whole part? Like when you see, okay, we have a guy who is determined to get his pro card, but genetically he's not up there to play a big role in the league. How big of a role is it for the coach to say, okay, well, we can go up to that level, but just be mindful of your health and all stuff around it. Like you're not a big player in the pro league.
Yeah, like you'll see a commonality with the guys that aren't blessed with the best bodybuilding potential, physique potential genetically, and they're probably the individuals, you know, maybe that aren't being coached efficiently, but they're probably the individuals that are being more aggressive with what they're doing to get where they want to be. And then from a coaching perspective, it's obviously just being mindful of the fact that like there are decisions that are conducive to the goal, and there are decisions that are just reckless. Like we need to divide those things. So the coaching element plays a massive part in that, because you need to really maximize all those 1% variables to get there if they're not gifted. But then again, like I've also coached people that have, you know, turned to pro level that have either been competing for a small amount of time or a long amount of time, that are very genetically gifted, that also need the coaching role, because when they're left to their own accord, they rely on that potential too much and they just get lazy.
Yeah.
Like I've coached a few individuals that, you know, they know their potential and they've been successful at a certain level, but when they get to that pro qualifier standard, the level of effort and discipline needed doesn't reflect in what they need to deliver. And you're going to get to a point where if you've done a few of those shows and the judges consistently see you at 85, 90%, and they know you can be better, they'll bully you into being 100% before they reward you. Yeah. And it's something that like, it almost becomes a little bit of a game where it's like, if you come out on stage and they're like, you could be sharper than that. You look fucking great, but you could be sharper than that. Even if you probably do look the best on stage. Sometimes I've seen it where the judge is like, he's not good enough to turn pro yet because he's not 100%. So like even the guys that are really genetically gifted and the girls that are really genetically gifted, that coaching role model and that coaching role is there to just really make sure they kind of back up what they're capable of doing and they see their full potential.
And do you think the quality of the jury panel, do you think they noticed that quickly? Like, okay, last time we saw you on stage and it's still not as what we expected of you, or we see you can still do better. Do you really think the quality of jurying is that high too?
When you go to the same shows, you go to the Spains, the Portugals, the amateur Olympias are always usually going to have one or two judges that go and dart between all the shows, or especially when the American judges come over, you've got, Serge or, Jack Sullivan or, Tyler's more so in the US, but like Steve Weinberger will be at some of the European shows, the Arnolds, the amateur Olympias, like, the Emilios, the Mazes.
Yeah.
Like, those are the guys that are going to really fuck you up in terms of like, they're going to remember you and they're going to remember what you brought. And that's going to be the little ear in the back of you. When they give you feedback, they'll be like, you're still not where I think you should be, or there's still not a 5% there. And like, that's frustrating to hear, but it's true. Like, because they're telling you that because they know you can be competitive as a pro. But until you're 100%, you're going to get eaten up on a pro stage, regardless of how blessed you are. Yeah. You need to be 100%, because then once they've given you once they've said, look, this is good enough, you turn pro, it's them giving you confirmation that you're ready to then go and be competitive at that pro level as well.
So they keep poking you till you're on the right path.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's a game. They've always told us, like, once you start out with bodybuilding and you start to get into PEDs, like there are levels to it. as in you start with this and you don't add this until you're that far into your journey. Things like GH and insulin, those kind of things. Would you say, like talking from a beginner's perspective, right? A guy in his 20s going into his first show, is there any ideal time for certain compounds to be deployed to maximize potential?
I think it's all relative to, like, I'd use the analogy of like, it's relative to the athlete's perception of risk. So like what they're deeming as like acceptable and non-acceptable for what they're willing to do in terms of risk. And it's also the coach's responsibility to allow them to understand the potential, the potential consequences and ramifications of their decisions. So it's like, these tools are available. They all have their place. They all have, an effective way of using them and a potentially reckless way of using them. And if we're going to make those decisions, then you need to be understanding of having an awareness over the impacts they have on your health, the impacts they have on your blood work, the impacts they have on your longevity in the sport. Like I wouldn't say that they're, and this is generalized speaking, but I wouldn't say there's anything that's off the cards when we're looking at insulin usage, growth hormone usage, like, whether we're playing, one or two compounds, we're using test and masteron in a prep, and then we're like, right, we're going to layer on some lipolytics. Do we need to use thyroid replacement, whatever it might be? It's more so just the fact of like, is it logical and is it needed to get them to the level they want to be at that given time? Like, if I can win a regional overall, just using a little bit of test and a little bit of masteron with a client, then I've got all that toolbox left to my disposal. Whereas we've also seen guys that just exhaust that PED toolbox, and there's so many other things that are just being left to chance. Like, they're not being consistent with their nutrition, or their nutrition's poor quality, or they're half-assing it in their training, or they're being lazy when it comes to output and expenditure. They're being lazy when it comes to posing. Like, you can abuse the PEDs all day long and make those decisions early on to be reckless, but like, we've all seen the competitors that, he's the guy on the most gear in his class, but he's not won. Well, there's a reason why he's not won, because all the boxes haven't been ticked first before he actually makes that decision. And generally speaking, the more gifted guys and girls, the less they're going to have to use and expose themselves to get to a certain level, because that's ideal. Because then once we're at that pro level, then we have a bigger toolbox to use to continue the acceleration of progress. But it's an individual decision that needs to be made, but it all comes down to the awareness over risk and the ability to apply things effectively and in the right moment and at the right applicable dosage for the goal.
Got it.
Do you think the general use in PEDs at this point is getting safer use, or how do you see that spectrum? Because
I think it's I do think across the board it is generally improving, just because of more information and more awareness over people talking about it, whether it's on podcasts or YouTube or J3U or other things, that other mediums and platforms that are discussing better ways of doing things and potentially having more of awareness over risk. I think generally speaking it is improving, but you are always going to get the pockets of the industry that just use the route one approach of just throwing a kitchen sink at it and seeing what sticks. And you're gonna get elite level coaches who are coaching very high level athletes that are doing those things as well. But that's just the industry. It's a bit of the Wild West in terms of bodybuilding. When it comes down to coaching, you're always gonna get that. And the rest of the coaches in the industry that do have a slightly more calculated way of doing things, it's then just a balance of having athlete health in mind, but also being aggressive enough to be competitive in those environments and understanding the interplay between the two. Does it mean that, right, I don't want to have any skewing of client blood work, so I'm only going to use 200 milligrams of test with all my clients? But it's like, if that was the case, then you're probably not going to win very many shows. No. So we need to find a middle ground between the two of, it's using enough for the individual to get over the finish line, but having an awareness over the impacts the decisions have.
Yeah. So just to portray, let's say you start with a blank sheet, 20-year-old guy or maybe even younger. In your eyes, like, what would be the perfect journey from beginner to pro? I mean, we covered a few of these things already, like obviously use the least amount that you need to get to a certain level. but like from a trainings perspective and all that stuff, somebody who comes in like point blank, doesn't know anything, but has to go to become a pro. So you can mold them all you want, basically.
He saw some videos of Dan and me online, and then he thought, yes.
All those guys on YouTube, and I was like,
Yeah.
those guys. I think the biggest thing is obviously when you first get that individual, it's understanding like, are they ready to compete yet, or does there need to be improvements made before they even jump into their first prep or think about their first prep? So 9 times out of 10, like there probably is a gap that needs to be closed before you even want to step on stage. And then once that level of muscularity is there, the first prep for me would be, and I wouldn't set any limitations in terms of like, look, you could do really well in this first year, but you also need to get your feet wet here in terms of like seeing the environment, being in that environment, having stage time, seeing how you actually compose and perform on stage in terms of presentation and posing, and using that first season as a tone setter for what needs to be improved moving into season 2. And don't get me wrong, some people do very well in their first season, some people turn pro in their first season, but the 9 times out of 10, you're just taking feedback, objective feedback from that first season, going into a second off season, making the improvements you need to make, and then coming back and being competitive. But I think the biggest thing there is, not jumping on the hype train of I'm seeing all this stuff on YouTube or Instagram where all my mates are competing, so I just want to jump into a prep and see what happens. Like, just have the patience of going and watching a show first and seeing the standard, and then seeing how far you're away from that first before you can think about tying together a first prep. And you might just need to spend a period of time just putting tissue on and growing before that becomes a reality.
And if you compare yourself as a coach to other coaches, where do you think, because we can all see the short amount of how quick you've grown the last couple of years. So where do you see yourself, and what's the difference between you compared to other coaches? So where does the quality of athletes come from, stuff like that?
So I think probably one of the big things in terms of like people that have gone on to string together like long periods of success competitively, we're probably having like a longer term vision. So like you've both seen like the ability to use, like, have an appreciation over a timeline and look ahead into the future, not just like coaching on week to week and being reactive with things, like having long-term planning of what the goals are and how we're going to get there, and breaking that down into, almost like reverse engineering the timeline. I think that's a really important element there, because you only need like a few of those opportunities to do well before momentum starts to build there in terms of who's knocking at your door, who's inquiring, who wants to talk to you about coaching, and who wants to put feelers out there. And then, I think for me, the biggest thing has been, it only takes a few opportunities to do well and to strike at that level and to win, for then a few more doors to open. And then you just repeat the process with those individuals. And every time those doors open, the level and the caliber of athlete just gets a little bit higher each time, because when you're consistently in those mixes at those shows, on show day, being present, whatever it might be, those conversations, and you're in the network. I refer to it as almost like a network in the industry, where it's like, if you go to a pro qualifier, you're going to see the same athletes over and over and over again. You're going to see the same coaches, you're going to see the same judges, and it's just building rapport and building a network of colleagues and of athletes that and the more those doors open, the more the opportunities open. It's going to take some skill to actually get over the finish line and win, but the more those opportunities open and the more you take and capitalize on those opportunities, the higher the caliber gets over time. Like, if you asked me like 3 years ago, like I was mainly coaching like, entry-level regional athletes that were wanting to get to like a British final. And then like, I want the first call out at a British final. I want to get to, I want to qualify for nationals. Whereas now it's developed into something on a larger scale and a more competitive scale, just because, 3 years ago, all I focused on was winning the British finals. Yeah. And then once I won the first British final, it's like, right, there's 2 inquiries there that now I want to get a pro card, where it's like, let's win 2 pro cards. And then once the 2 pro cards are won, then it's like, right, now there's more people that want to turn pro, or now there's people that want to compete as pros. It's just it's a cumulative thing that just happens to happen with a lot of time being put in. But you've just got to focus on what's ahead of you. You can't get too ahead of yourself in terms of where you want to be in 5 years. Just focus on the now.
if you look at it that way, something you just said about something you see with all those athletes that make it to the pro level is they're very competitive. But then you as a coach, you're also very competitive actually, because you want that win just as much as they want. Maybe you want it even more than they want it, or that's important part too, I guess. Just being competitive as a coach yourself as well, as in having a competitive mindset.
There's been many times where I've paid for clients to travel to shows and paid for an entry fees and paid for their flights because I was like, you need to do this show because you and like that's just me being in, like, I remember the example, like Momsey when he turned pro, like I paid for him to come to the UK, I paid for him to go to the show because it's like, dude, I know what you're capable of. You might not see it because you've tried so many times to do it, but it hasn't quite materialized. And he's another one where the example of, like, he's the epitome of elite genetics, but there's another 10% that wasn't being capitalized upon there. And I was like, you need to live in my house for 2 weeks and then we're going to go and do this show in Finland and we're going to win. And obviously that ended up happening, but it's just when I can see it and I know that they're so close, but there's something in their life or there's something in their mind that's a barrier for them to get there, but I can see it so close to happening. That's just a competitive nature in my blood to just think, like, fuck it, like, we're going to make this happen because I know it's possible.
But that's also a big difference, right? For the people who you're coaching or who you're not coaching, that they're able to see when they look at you, like, okay, if I'm coached by this dude, I'm maybe actually able to get pro instead of just doing something they like and do a show here, do a show there. I do it because I like it. No, not instead of doing it because I want to get a pro card. And if you also, as a coach, how do you say that? Show to the crowd the belief that they can actually do it also gets bigger, right?
Yeah. The psychology is a huge part of the whole process, obviously.
Yeah.
It's like you need to have that engine within yourself, but if you have a coach who's competitive and wants it just as bad as you, it's like having a second engine to push you just that much harder and further, basically.
Yeah. Because you've got that, you've got that voice in your shoulder, or you've got that second pair of eyes that's expecting a certain level of standard to be upheld. And on those hard days when it's like you wake up and you're fucking knackered and it's like, I've got to go and do card, I've got to do this. It's like, well, it's not only for me, but I'm doing this for Cal as well, because we're both in this together. And there's another level that you can break into there for sure.
100%. So as a last one, what would be your best advice to anyone, like a single best advice to who's starting out with the dream to become an IFBB pro and eventually go to the Olympia? Your best piece of it.
So I think the best piece of advice would be, like, be ultra competitive and allow that to shine, but also have the patience of knowing that it's a journey to get there. And I think the best people and the most successful people that scale within that competitive realm are the people that can just focus on maximizing one phase at a time. So instead of thinking, I'm going to prep in May and I can't wait to prep, all I'm thinking about is prep. Let's focus on the day and the week and the month that you're in, and maximizing the off season first, and then maximizing your pre-prep phase, and then maximizing every week of the prep, and then maximizing the peak, and then maximizing the post-show phase. And people that can string together just being very present in the part of the journey they're in are always the people that do the best and the people that stay in the sport the longest, because they're just very calculated with everything they do, and they're just focusing on being present and maximizing the yield of each individual phase, and that's ultimately going to just relate directly to progress as well.
All right. Well, that was those were all our questions. One more thing for people to find you and Pro Coach. I believe you also have a new project where, like, coaches can sign up to and undergo the process and learn about it as well at the same time, which seems really interesting. So for people who want to look into that, where can they find it? So
all the social media platforms, if you just type in Pro Coach or Team Pro Coach, it will come up. Website, www.teamprocoach.com. The process is what we've just launched, which is basically like a one-to-one online mentoring service for coaches themselves that want to break into that kind of physique coaching realm and do, you know, you all start with the photo shoots, you all start with the transformation clients before you can get to the competitors. And we're kind of teaching that from the ground up with the Pro Coach process, which will eventually happen 4 times a year. The first one's in motion now, but we'll do it every quarter. And it will basically be taking a coach on in their own individual photo shoot prep. So you have a 12-week prep with one of our coaches, but you're also getting mentored at the same time over kind of what it takes to get a client over the finish line in every element of that process. So it goes full circle there in terms of like, and I'm a firm believer, and I think you guys will agree, where if you are going to prep these guys for stage or for photo shoots, you need to know what it feels like. You need to know what it takes to get there in yourself as well, because there's such a greater level of understanding once you've done it.
You need to walk the talk.
It makes you a more refined coach. 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. It's such an important part.
Yeah.
All right. I think that wraps things up nicely.
Yeah. Thank
Thanks,
you for
Blake.
your time and patience.
Yeah, thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah. We're nothing to add up to that, right? Sorry?
Thanks for the opportunity.
No, yeah, no, well, thank you.
I'm gonna go out and get some more steps done, because otherwise Calum is gonna be angry.
Yeah, I'm going back to bed.
All right, man.
Thank you for your time, bro.
All right, cheers.
Cheers. Bye-bye.